The morning red willow watched her be sold. The sky looked like it couldn't decide whether to forgive the earth or punish it. Pale light spilled over the stock pens, turning dust into something almost holy. Almost. A wagon stood near the rails where cattle usually waited their turn, but this time there were no horns or hooves inside it. There was only a girl with her back straight as a fence post and a baby pressed against her chest like the last warm thing left in the world. Etta May Holloway did not cry. She had learned early that tears invited opinions, and opinions turned into prices. She rocked her baby brother slowly, counting his breaths instead of the men circling the wagon. Samuel's small hand clutched the front of her dress, his fingers curling and uncurling like he was trying to remember something safe. The wind cut through the square, lifting the hem of her skirt, whispering secrets she didn't want to hear. Silas Rourke's voice carried easily, smooth as a well-oiled hinge. He spoke of work and mouths to feed, of usefulness and burden, of how some things were better taken together. Coins chimed softly as they changed hands, a sound too light for what it meant. People gathered not close enough to be accused of caring, not far enough to claim ignorance. Eyes slid over Etta like she was part of the wagon's woodwork. A woman covered her child's ears. A man spat and looked away. When the baby cried sharp and sudden, Etta leaned forward, her body forming a shelter without thinking. "Shoo," she whispered. Though the world had never hushed for her, she felt the weight of every promise she had made to a dying mother. The way those words had settled into her bones and stayed. Keep him safe. Keep him warm. Don't let him know how cruel people can be. Promises were heavy things. They bent a girl's back long before time ever got a chance. No one stepped forward at first. There was a moment, stretched thin as wire, where Etta wondered if this was simply how it ended. Quietly, publicly, with no one brave enough to interrupt. Then boots stopped moving. The sound was small, but it landed hard. Caleb Boone stood apart from the others, dust clinging to his coat like it belonged there. He had the look of a man who had spent too many evenings listening to a house breathe without anyone else inside it. His eyes were steady, not sharp, and they did not linger where they shouldn't. He watched the girl's hands, the way they curved protectively around the baby, the way she made herself smaller so he could feel larger. It was a posture he recognized. Grief taught people how to fold themselves. He hadn't come to town to buy anything. He needed nails and flour, maybe a new hinge if the store still had one straight enough to behave. But something about the quiet in Etta's face pulled at him, the kind of quiet that wasn't peace but endurance. When Silas laughed and spoke of taking the pair cheap, Caleb felt something tighten behind his ribs. "I'll take them," he said, not raising his voice. Silas blinked, surprised more by the tone than the words. "Girl comes with the baby," he said, like it was a joke everyone was supposed to understand. Caleb didn't smile. "Then I take both." The square stirred. This wasn't how transactions usually went. People preferred clean edges, simple exchanges. Coins passed hands again. Paper was scratched with careless lines. And just like that, the matter was decided by men who wouldn't have to carry it home. Etta stared at Caleb, her eyes dark and searching, as if hope were a blade she needed to test before touching. He met her gaze and said the first thing that mattered, the thing that settled somewhere deep and careful inside her. "He ain't baggage," he said quietly. "And neither are you." The ride to the ranch felt longer than the distance deserved. Etta sat stiff in the wagon, ready for the turn where someone would say they'd made a mistake. Samuel slept, his breath warm against her skin, trusting in a way she couldn't afford to. Caleb didn't ask questions. He drove with patience, letting the horse find its rhythm, as if he understood that some stories asked to be told slowly or not at all. His ranch wasn't grand. A small house, weathered but upright, a fence that leaned like it had opinions. Inside, there was a crib pushed against the far wall, clean and unused, waiting for a child who had never learned to cry. Etta noticed everything. The way Caleb set down food and then stepped outside so she could eat without eyes on her. The way he spoke to the horse like it was an old friend. That night, wrapped in a blanket that smelled faintly of soap and sun, Etta cried into the quiet. Not from fear, from the strange ache of not being chased away. Days passed with the careful grace of things learning to exist together. Caleb fixed the fence, Etta mended shirts she hadn't been asked to touch. He left extra wood by the stove without comment. She learned how he took his coffee and made it that way, setting the cup down where he would find it like it had always belonged there. Samuel laughed one morning. A sudden bright sound that stopped Caleb mid-step. He knelt awkwardly, letting the baby grab his finger. And for a moment the house remembered what it was built for. Red Willow remembered too. Gossip traveled faster than wagons, and it arrived at the ranch dressed in borrowed concern. Mrs. Dorothea Klein came by with a pan she didn't need returned, her eyes measuring corners and judging dust. "You can't play family with bought goods," she said sweetly, as if kindness were a favor she might revoke. Sheriff Amos Pike stopped Caleb in town, his voice low. "People don't like what they don't understand," he warned, not unkindly. Etta heard enough. Old shame crept back, familiar as hunger. One evening she stood by the door, Samuel asleep against her shoulder, and offered to leave. Her voice shook, but she stood straight. "I don't want to bring trouble," she said. Caleb looked at her like the idea had never occurred to him. "This house don't throw people away," he said, and went back to fixing the latch like it was settled law. The town gathering came with lantern light and restless air. Silas found his audience easily, his words sharp and careless. He spoke of used stock and proof of what a man looked like when he bought what others discarded. The room waited for Caleb to shrink, to make apologies that would keep the peace. Instead, he stepped forward. He didn't raise his voice. He told them who Etta was, and he told it plain. A sister who chose hunger over leaving a child behind. A girl who kept love alive when the world priced it cheap. He spoke of choosing, of how some things mattered because someone decided they did. "They ain't owned," he said, his gaze steady. "They're mine the same way this land is, because I chose them, and they chose me." Etta felt something straighten inside her, a spine she hadn't known she'd been missing. She stood taller, not rescued, but chosen, and the room shifted around that truth whether it liked it or not. That night the ranch was quiet again. Etta rocked Samuel on the porch. The stars scattered overhead like promises no one could collect. Caleb came out and draped a shawl over her shoulders, soft and worn. A thing that had known another life and was ready to know a new one. Not replacement. Inheritance. "I never been anyone's family," Etta said finally. The words small and brave. Caleb nodded, looking out at the dark where the land breathed easy. "You are now," he said, like it was something the world had always been waiting to hear. If you're listening close, you can still hear it. The sound of a door closing on shame. The quiet click of belonging finding its place. Sometimes family isn't blood or law. Sometimes it's the moment someone stands when everyone else sits back down. Sometimes dignity arrives without announcement, settles into your hands, and once it does, it never truly leaves.